It all began in Manisa, when Talya, 27, was given the task of preparing the wedding gown of Sultan Evran's future wife. What should have been nothing more than work turned into a forbidden romance, lived in silence and filled with guilt. But one day before the ceremony, a single discovery made their love stop being the biggest problem. The marriage between Sultan Evran and Selena was not born from romance, but from a necessity that all of Manisa pretended to call fate. At 38, Evran carried on his face the firm beauty of a man used to being obeyed, but also the elegant weariness of someone who could never afford to weaken. Tall, with a trimmed beard and a deep gaze, he crossed the halls with a presence that made even ministers straighten their posture. Selena, at 24, came from a noble family whose alliance would calm old disputes between powerful houses. That was why, when the engagement was announced, no one asked whether there was love. They only asked whether the kingdom would become safer. Evran listened to the celebrations without smiling too much, because he knew exactly the price of that agreement. "Manisa needs stability," he said to his chief advisor. "And you need a wife before the court," the man replied carefully. The Sultan neither confirmed nor denied it. While the bells were being prepared and the invitations passed through the hands of the scribes, large boxes of fabric began arriving at the palace. They were not delivered just anywhere, because the ceremonial garments would be made inside the royal residence itself, in the sewing wing reserved for the most important occasions. Guards crossed the corridors carrying silks, velvets, golden threads, fine lace and mantles wrapped like treasures. The maids quickly cleared the way, and each box seemed to announce that the wedding had already begun, even before the altar. In that wing, Talya lifted her eyes when she heard the first chest being placed on the main table. At 27, she knew fabric by sound, thread by touch, and mistakes by the silence of those trying to hide them. Zehra Hanım, her 60-year-old mistress, walked beside her with a serious expression. "Today, girl, you will not sew for a noble house. You will sew for the history of Manisa." Talya ran her hand over the lid of the chest and answered softly, "Then we cannot make a mistake." Zehra released a dry sigh. Inside this palace, making mistakes has never been an option. When the first fabric was opened, even the oldest seamstresses fell silent. The silk meant for Selena's gown was pale, heavy, and delicate at the same time, as if it had been made to be seen from afar and remembered up close. Beside it, Sultan Evran's mantles came in noble tones, with embroidery designed to highlight his authority before the court. Talya observed the pieces without romantic fascination, only with the attention of someone who knew that a crooked stitch could ruin weeks of work. At that moment, the Sultan was still only measurement, title, and responsibility. Selena was still only the bride Manisa expected to see crossing the hall. Everything seemed to be in its proper place, just as protocol demanded. "You will take care of the fine adjustments on the ceremonial mantle," Zehra announced. Talya turned her face quickly. "The Sultan's mantle?" "Exactly. And you will also help with the bride's gown when I tell you to." The choice made some women stop what they were doing, but no one dared argue with Zehra Hanım. Talya was not the oldest nor the most influential, but she had a precision few could repeat. She sewed without apparent haste, though her eyes worked faster than her hands. And that was precisely why Zehra trusted her, with the details that would remain too close to the court's gaze. "Do not take praise as a promise, nor criticism as a sentence," the old woman warned. Talya frowned. "Are you preparing me to sew or to survive?" Zehra looked around before answering. Inside a palace, sometimes they are the same thing. The sentence hung between the rolls of fabric without sounding exaggerated, because everyone there knew the ceremony would bring payment, prestige, and risk, and for Talya, that payment meant more than any of them imagined. The truth was that Talya needed that work like someone needs an open door before nightfall. Her younger sister still depended on her, and every coin earned at the palace helped keep away debts that grew like shadows. She did not speak of that with the other seamstresses, because too much need easily became a topic in the mouths of cruel people. On the outside, she acted as though that mission were just another great service. Inside, she calculated how much she could save if everything was delivered without delay. A royal administrator entered the wing with a list in his hands and a stern face. Any flaw will be deducted. Any delay will be reported to the ceremony council. Zara lifted her chin. My women know how to work. I hope they know how to work under pressure, he replied. Talya lowered her eyes to the fabric and understood that this wedding could either save her home or destroy the little she still had. That same afternoon, Selena visited the sewing wing, accompanied by ladies, maids, and 2 women from her family. She was beautiful in a cold way, with impeccable posture and a voice low enough to force others to lean in to hear her. She did not arrive shouting or accusing anyone because there was still no reason for scandal. But it was enough for her to enter for the room to feel smaller. I want the gown to look worthy of a woman who will be remembered, Selena said, looking at the fabrics with demand in her eyes. Zara gave a discreet bow. It will be done as you wish. Selena touched the silk with 2 fingers and asked, and if I change my mind about the cut? Then we will adjust it, Zara replied. Good. I do not like hearing that something is impossible. Talya listened in silence, understanding that this bride did not need to raise her voice to make a threat sound like good manners. Selena did not look at Talya as a rival, nor as a danger, because Talya was still nothing more than one seamstress among others. Even so, her presence made it clear that the gown would not merely have to be beautiful, it would have to obey every whim of the Sultan's future wife. She asked for 3 sleeve options to be prepared, then asked that none of them look ordinary. She asked for shine, but not excess. She asked for lightness, but without simplicity. She asked for grandeur, but without seeming desperate for attention. One of the seamstresses swallowed hard, and Talya realized the night would be long. Before leaving, Selena turned to Zara. The first fitting of my gown will be brief. Do not make me waste time. Zara merely inclined her head. As you wish. When the bride left, no one spoke for several seconds. Sultan Evran appeared in the sewing wing only at the end of the following day, and his arrival changed the air before he even said a word. He did not enter surrounded by exaggeration, but 2 guards and 1 advisor were enough to remind everyone who he was. Talya was near the central table, checking the measurements of the mantle, when she heard the seamstresses rise almost at the same time. When she lifted her eyes, she saw the man Manisa called Savior, Judge, and Selena's future husband. Evran was even more impressive up close, not because of the richness of his clothes, nor because of his title, but because of the calm with which he occupied the space. His gaze seemed to cut through noise, lies, and intentions before anyone had the courage to speak. Zara Hanım, he said with unexpected respect. Sultan Evran, the old woman replied, bowing. Talya followed the gesture, never imagining that he would notice precisely her. Evran noticed Talya because she was the only one who did not remain frozen for too long. She bowed, yes, but soon returned to protecting the mantle spread open on the table, as if the fabric were a sacred responsibility. That drew a brief flicker of interest from him. Is she the one handling the details? The Sultan asked. Zara answered before anyone else could even breathe. Talya has the best hand for fine finishing. Talya felt her own name sound too large in her mistress's mouth. Evran approached the table and observed the embroidery marked on the fabric. And do you agree with this design? He asked. The question caught everyone off guard, because a sultan did not normally ask a seamstress for her opinion. Talya hesitated for only a second. I agree with the intention, Your Majesty, but not with the placement. The advisor's face tightened, and the silence became dangerous. Zara looked at Talya as if telling her to measure her next word more carefully than any hem. Evran, however, did not seem offended. On the contrary, his eyes gained an almost amused curiosity. Explain, he ordered, but without harshness. Talya pointed to the fabric, maintaining a respectful distance. This embroidery enhances the symbol, but it weighs down the shoulder. When you walk, the piece will pull to one side, The advisor tried to intervene. "Your Majesty, this was approved by the ceremonial department." Evran lifted his hand, interrupting him without even looking. "And will the ceremonial department wear the mantle for me?" One of the seamstresses almost choked in shock, and Talya had to hold back a smile. The Sultan noticed. That small reaction from Talya was quick, discreet, almost nothing. But Evran saw it, and for the first time in many days, he smiled without effort. "Then correct it," he said. Talya lowered her head. "Yes, Your Majesty. And do not correct it to please the council. Correct it so it works." The administrator present stiffened, because that order changed the hierarchy of the room for a few minutes. Talya, who until then had merely received instructions, now had the word of the Sultan himself protecting her judgment. Even so, that also brought risk, because if the adjustment failed, no one would blame the ceremonial council. They would blame the seamstress who had dared to disagree. And when Evran scheduled the first fitting for the following morning, Talya felt that the real tests were only beginning. The next morning, the sewing wing already had its doors open before the palace's first call had even sounded. Talya had spent part of the night adjusting the position of the embroidery on Sultan Evran's mantle. Zehra Hanım inspected every detail with an almost frightening seriousness, because she knew that fitting could decide everyone's respect for them. "Breathe before you speak," the old woman advised, without taking her eyes off the piece. Talya answered softly, "I'll only speak if he asks." "Powerful men always ask when they already know what they want to hear," Zehra said. Talya had no time to reply, because the sound of the guard's footsteps reached the corridor. The Sultan entered shortly after, elegant, calm, wearing a simple outfit underneath to make the adjustments easier. Even without a mantle, without ceremony, and without the court around him, Evran seemed larger than the room. Talya lowered her eyes quickly, unsettled by how fast she noticed it. Evran stepped onto the small fitting platform without treating anyone as invisible. He greeted Zehra respectfully, thanked a maid who was holding the pins, and only then looked at Talya. "You moved the embroidery," he said, observing the fabric in the mirror. Talya held her breath for a moment. "I did, Your Majesty. The weight now falls better across both shoulders." He tried on the mantle, walked 2 steps, and stopped. The ceremonial advisor, who was watching everything with a stern face, looked ready to criticize. But Evran ran his hand along the side of the piece and said, "She was right." The sentence fell like a silent order inside the room. Zehra did not smile, but her eyes shone for a second. Talya felt relief, although she knew that being right in front of certain men could cost dearly later. Selena's first gown fitting took place a few hours later, and the air changed completely. The bride entered with ladies, maids, and an impatience that seemed to arrive before she did. The gown was still in its initial structure, with parts held by pins and discreet markings for the next adjustments. Selena looked at her own reflection and pressed her lips together. "It is too heavy," she said. Talya approached carefully. "There are still internal removals to be made, my lady. After the marking, the piece will become lighter." "I did not ask about later," Selena replied without raising her voice. "I am talking about now." Zehra intervened calmly. "That is precisely what the first fitting is for, to correct." Selena slowly turned her face. "Then correct it without tiring me." Talya felt her face grow warm, not from shame, but from tension. With every new adjustment, Selena found another reason to complain. The waist seemed too high, then too low, then too stiff, then too simple. The sleeves were supposed to lengthen her arms, but not hide her jewels. The neckline was supposed to look noble, but never modest enough to dim her presence. "This wedding will be seen by all of Manisa," Selena said, staring into the mirror. "Yes, my lady," Talya replied, fastening a pin carefully. "Then do not give me a garment that looks as though it was made for an ordinary wife." One of the seamstresses turned pale, fearing that any wrong movement would irritate the bride even more. Talya kept her hands steady, but inside she was beginning to understand that this gown would not merely be sewn, it would have to be conquered, piece by piece. Outside the palace walls, all of Manisa spoke of the ceremony. In the markets, women imagined Selena's gown as if they were describing a sacred jewel. In the taverns, men wagered on which noble houses would gain the most influence after the union. In the courtyards, children repeated Sultan Evran's name as though he were a character from a living legend. But inside the council chamber, the words were far less enchanting. "The marriage will end Selena's family's resistance," one minister said. Evran remained standing before the window, looking at the city that expected so much from him. "I know what this agreement buys," the Sultan replied. "It buys peace, Your Majesty." Evran turned his face only enough to say, "Peace that is bought always sends the bill later." The minister did not insist, but another older man dared to ask what everyone else avoided. "And what about your feelings, Your Majesty?" Evran let out a short laugh without joy. "Feelings are rarely invited to royal weddings." The silence grew heavy because no one could deny that truth. "Selena will be honored," he continued. "Manisa will have the alliance it needs, and I will keep my word. Even without love." The Sultan's gaze hardened. A sultan does not rule while waiting for his heart to be consulted. The answer ended the conversation, but it did not erase the emptiness it left behind. And when Evran returned for another fitting that afternoon, he seemed to be carrying a decision that would not leave him in peace. Selena and Evran met in the smaller hall to discuss details of the ceremony before his second fitting. There were seating maps, guest lists, and decoration sketches spread across a long table. Selena seemed excited, but not by the presence of her groom. She spoke of the musicians, the jewels, the entrance into the hall, the position of the authorities, and the impact her image would cause. "I want my arrival to be remembered before the vows are even spoken," she said. Evran watched her in silence for a few seconds. "And the vows?" Selena smiled, as if the question were only a formality. "They will be important too, of course." "Of course," he repeated without showing irritation. But something in that tone made Talya, who was passing at a distance with fabrics in her arms, quicken her steps without knowing why. The Sultan's second fitting was calmer than Talya expected. Evran listened to Zehra's instructions, raised his arms when asked, and remained still while Talya checked the fall of the fabric. Unlike Selena, he did not seem to want to turn every adjustment into a dispute. "Is it tight?" Talya asked, avoiding looking directly at his face. "Only enough to remind me that breathing is also a political decision," Evran replied. One seamstress swallowed a laugh, but Talya could not hold back her smile. He noticed and tilted his head slightly. "There, now I know the mantle still allows for some miracle." Talya tried to return to her work, but that unexpected humor had broken the distance between them for one dangerous instant. When Evran removed the outer piece so Talya could adjust the inner seam, she became visibly awkward. There was nothing improper, nothing beyond the work, but his nearness made the air feel tighter. He was too handsome up close, with the kind of mature beauty that did not ask for attention, only received it. Talya took the measuring tape and chose the wrong side out of nervousness. Evran looked at the tape, then at her and said quietly, "Should I be worried about this measurement? Or about the fact that the Sultan shrank overnight?" Talya blinked, surprised, and ended up smiling before she could stop herself. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. Do not apologize for smiling. In this palace, that has become rare." The sentence was simple, but it stayed with her longer than it should have, and Talya knew, with fear, that she no longer saw Evran only as the man she sewed for. It was at that moment that Selena entered the sewing wing without announcing herself, perfumed, impeccable, and accompanied by two ladies. Talya immediately took a step back, as if her own conscience had pushed her. Selena saw nothing she could accuse, only her fiancé in another clothing fitting. Even so, she crossed the room with confidence and placed her hand on Evran's arm. "My Sultan," she said, smiling at him before kissing him in front of everyone. The kiss was brief, elegant, and public enough to remind every person in that room of their place. Evran returned it politely, but without the spark Talya had just seen appear when he laughed. Selena began speaking about the party plans. the foreign authorities, and the exact moment when they would enter together. Talya lowered her face to collect the pins, trying to suffocate a pain she had no right to feel. After all, she was only the seamstress, and that handsome, kind, unreachable man already belonged to another woman. That same night, after the mantle fitting, Sultan Evran asked Selena to have dinner with him without any ladies around. He did not want to speak only of jewels, triumphant entrances, or foreign guests. He wanted to know the woman who, in a few days, would be called his wife before all of Manisa. Selena accepted with a beautiful smile, but her eyes wandered more over the golden goblets than over his face. "Do you like music?" Evran asked, trying to open a simple conversation. "I like it when it announces my arrival," Selena replied, adjusting her bracelet. The Sultan observed her in silence without showing disappointment. "And what do you like when no one is watching?" Selena took a moment as if that question had no use. "To win," she finally said, with an almost elegant sincerity. Evran rested his fingers on the table, weighing that answer more than she imagined. "To win against whom?" he asked. Selena smiled, leaning slightly forward. "Against anyone who doubts I was born to occupy a high place." There was ambition in her, and that was not a crime inside a palace. The problem was that Evran found no warmth behind that ambition. "And me?" the Sultan asked directly. Selena blinked, surprised for an instant, but quickly recovered her composure. "You will be my husband." "That already says everything." "Sometimes it says nothing," Evran replied calmly. The sentence made Selena narrow her eyes slightly, but she did not lose her poise. "Your Majesty, women like me are prepared for important alliances, and men like me are taught to accept them," he said. Selena smiled as if that settled the matter. "Then we are more alike than it seems." Evran almost agreed, but something inside him rejected that easy answer. She did not seem eager to share a life with him. She seemed eager to enter the hall, receive bows, and feel the court beneath her feet. Even so, the kingdom needed that union. And the Sultan knew Manisa could not be ruled only by the desire to be loved. Later, when he withdrew to his chambers, Evran dismissed the servants before they could finish the formalities. He wanted silence, not advice. He lay down without fully removing the weight of the day from his shoulders. For a few minutes he stared at the ceiling, listening to the last distant sounds of the palace. He thought of Selena, of her cold beauty, of her hunger for greatness, and of the strange absence of any tenderness. It was not hatred, it was not contempt, it was only a distance he did not know would ever lessen. "It would be good," he murmured to himself, "if a sultan could choose like any other man." The answer came soon after, harsh and familiar. But he was not any other man. Evran turned onto his side, trying to drive that thought away before it took shape. True love was a beautiful story for poets, not for rulers surrounded by agreements. He had seen marriages secure borders, save families, and prevent wars. He had also seen men destroy entire kingdoms by following their hearts at the wrong moment. "I keep what I promised," he said quietly, as if he needed to hear his own decision. The phrase did not bring peace, but it brought direction. Manisa needed stability, and Selena offered exactly the alliance the court demanded. If there was no love, there would be respect. If there was no sincere desire, there would be duty. And Evran pushed away any hope that did not fit inside that promise. In the servants' quarters, Talya also could not fall asleep quickly. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands still on her lap, as if she was still holding invisible pins. She replayed Sultan Evran's fitting once, then again, even while trying to scold herself. She remembered his kindness toward Zara, his patience with the seamstresses, and the way he had joked to ease her embarrassment. "Stop this," she whispered to herself. But her mind returned to the same place, to his face up close, to his unexpected smile, to the way his voice seemed less heavy when he spoke inside the sewing wing. Talya squeezed her eyes shut, ashamed of her own heart. The next memory came like a cut. Selena entering the sewing wing and kissing her fiancé in front of everyone. Talya pressed a hand to her chest, irritated with herself. That kiss had not been wrong. What was wrong was that she had felt something when she saw it. "You are going mad," she murmured. "He is the Sultan. She is the bride. You sew the gown." The words were true, but they eased nothing. Talya thought of her sister, of the payment, of the life she needed to protect far from scandals. An impossible feeling could destroy everything she was trying to save, so she blew out the candle, lay down, and decided that the next day she would look only at fabrics, measurements, and threads. On the other side of the palace, Selena was awake for very different reasons. Sitting before the mirror, she removed her jewels one by one, admiring not their shine, but what they represented. In a few days, those pieces would no longer be ceremonial loans. They would be symbols of a position no woman in her family had ever reached before. "Sultana Selena," she murmured, savoring the sound with pleasure. A maid asked if she wished to rest. Selena looked at her reflection and smiled. "Rest is for those who have already reached the place they deserve." The maid lowered her head, not knowing whether that was an answer or a warning. Selena dismissed them all shortly after, waiting until the corridor was empty. When the palace sank into silence, Selena covered her hair with a dark veil and left through the back of her chambers. She did not walk like a distracted bride, but like someone who knew exactly the forbidden path. She passed through a side gallery, descended a narrow staircase, and avoided the lit area where the guards usually circulated. If she were seen, she could say she needed air, prayer, or escape from the pressure of the wedding, but there was no doubt in her steps. She continued to an old passage near the storage rooms, where the light barely reached the walls. There, she stopped and listened to her own heart beating with an anxiety she had not shown before the Sultan. "You took long enough," she said, without turning around. A male voice answered from the darkness, "And you came anyway." Selena closed her eyes for an instant, as if that were the only presence she had truly been waiting for. The man appeared behind her, tall, strong, wearing part of the palace guard's uniform. There was no reverence in his gesture. There was no respectful distance. He wrapped his arm around Selena's waist and pulled her against him, like someone touching something he already considered his. She released a low breath before turning her face. "Careful," she whispered. "If anyone sees us now, everything ends before it even begins." He smiled close to her. "Not for me. I have already waited too long." Then he kissed her, without the calculated delicacy she showed in front of Evran. Selena responded with an urgency she had never shown her fiancé. And there, in that distant darkness, the Sultan's future wife revealed that the most anticipated wedding in Manisa might be built on a dangerous lie. The next morning, the palace woke louder than ever, as if all of Manisa had entered through its gates. Servants hung fabrics along the corridors. Artisans measured columns, gardeners argued over flowers, and musicians tested notes in the main hall. Selena walked among them all with the confidence of someone who already saw herself as the owner of that world. "Not those flowers," she said without stopping. "I want something that looks rare, not something picked from a maid's backyard." Some women laughed quietly. Others lowered their eyes, and Selena disguised her arrogance with a polite smile whenever someone important approached. Sultan Evran watched part of it from a distance without interrupting. He had already understood that his bride knew the value of every public gesture very well. When she was surrounded by authorities, she spoke with sweetness. When she was among servants, her voice became a blade covered in silk. Even so, the preparations continued because Manisa expected a spectacle, and the palace could not stumble over its own celebration. In the sewing wing, the movement was also intense, until an unexpected summons emptied almost the entire space. Zara Hanum was called to review ceremonial fabrics in the larger hall, and the other seamstresses followed her, carrying boxes and ribbons. Talya remained alone, in charge of receiving any urgent requests that might arise. She tried to keep herself busy, organizing pins, folding fabrics, and checking a list she already knew almost by heart. but the silence of the room seemed to amplify every small thought she tried to hide. That was when firm footsteps stopped at the entrance. Talya lifted her face and almost dropped the scissors when she saw Sultan Evran. "Your Majesty," she said, rising quickly. He answered calmly, "It seems they have decided my mantle needs more adjustments than I do." Talya looked behind him, expecting to see Zara, an advisor, or at least a maid. But the Sultan was alone, with only one guard standing at a distance in the corridor outside the door. "Did the authorities request another fitting?" she asked, trying not to show her nervousness. "Request is not quite the word," Evran replied. "They discussed, concluded, ordered, and sent me here before I could ask whether the mantle would rule in my place." Talya tried to hold back a laugh but failed. The Sultan noticed, and a discreet smile appeared on his face. "So, there is still someone in this palace who finds this funny." She lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I will prepare the piece." Evran stepped onto the platform without impatience, keeping his arms in the position indicated. Talya picked up the mantle carefully and approached, feeling her own heart beat at an absurd rhythm. She repeated to herself that this was work, only work, and that she had to behave as she always did. But his presence made every movement more conscious, every breath more difficult. While adjusting the side of the piece, Talya placed the measuring tape in the wrong spot and realized it too late. Evran looked at the mirror, then at the crooked tape. "Should I inform the council that my shoulder has changed places since yesterday?" Talya stopped, surprised, and then laughed before she could control herself. He laughed too, softly, without the stiffness so common in court. For an instant, the Sultan seemed less distant, and that frightened her more than any scolding could have. "You do not need to be so tense," Evran said, softening his voice. Talya took a deep breath and returned to the adjustment. "It is hard not to be when everyone speaks as if one wrong seam could bring Manisa down. Some ministers believe in things even more absurd than that." She smiled again, now with less fear. Evran observed her concentration and asked, "Talya, isn't it?" She lifted her eyes for a second. "Yes, Your Majesty. Zara said you have the best hand for fine finishing. Zara Hanum says that when she wants to give me more work." Evran let out a short laugh, and Talya bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling too much. "And do you like this work?" he asked. "I like what it allows," she replied. "What does it allow?" Talya hesitated, because she was used to hiding her own life inside small answers. "It allows my sister to eat better, some debts not to grow, and my house to remain standing." Evran was silent for a moment. The answer was simple, without ornament, without calculation, without any desire to impress. "You speak of need as though you are not ashamed of it," he said. Talya answered softly, "I would be ashamed if I left those who depend on me uncared for." That sentence struck Evran with a quiet force. Selena spoke of place, name, and reverence. Talya spoke of family, work, and responsibility. There was no pose in her, no desire to appear greater before him. There was only a firm calm, the kind that does not need to raise its voice to exist. "Manisa would have fewer problems if more people thought that way," the Sultan said. Talya stood still, unsure whether she could accept that compliment without seeming bold. "I only do what I must, Your Majesty. Not everyone does." She leaned down to pick up a small piece that had slipped from the mantle. At the same instant, a pin fell to the floor with a thin sound that seemed to cut through the room. They both bent down at the same time. Talya reached for the pin. Evran picked up the small piece, and when they lifted their faces, they were too close. The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt full of things neither of them had permission to say. Talya felt her breath catch, and Evran did not immediately look away. He seemed surprised not by her, but by himself. "Your Majesty," she whispered, as if remembering his title could put the world back in place. Evran blinked slowly, still close. "Talya." Before either of them could move, the door to the sewing wing opened. Selena entered alone, with her fitting gown being carried by a maid just behind her. She stopped for a fraction of a second when she saw them both crouched down, too close to seem merely distant. Talya stood so quickly that she almost knocked over the box of pins. Evran also stepped back, regaining his posture with the speed of a man trained never to be found vulnerable. "Selena," the Sultan said, surprised. The bride smiled, but her eyes had already stored away the entire scene. "Forgive the interruption. I was told my gown was ready for another fitting." Talya lowered her face. "Yes, my lady, I can call Zehra Hanım." "That will not be necessary," Selena replied, far too sweetly. "You seem perfectly occupied here." Evran noticed the tone, but found no clear accusation to answer. Selena walked up to him, touched his chest with calculated intimacy, and kissed him in front of Talya. This time, the kiss was not brief, nor merely ceremonial. It was possessive enough to make even the Sultan remain still for an instant, before returning it politely. Talya felt her face grow hot and turned toward the table, pretending to look for thread. "I am eager for our wedding," Selena said, still close to Evran. "Everyone speaks of my entrance, but I only think of the moment when we will walk together." Evran watched her, surprised by that unusual display. "I am pleased to hear that," he replied. Selena glanced sideways at Talya without losing her smile. "I imagine it must be beautiful to work on something so grand," Selena continued. "Sewing the gown of a woman who will become the Sultan's wife must give one a curious feeling." Talya tightened her fingers around the fabric and answered with a controlled voice. "It is an honor to serve the palace." "Serve," Selena repeated, as if savoring the word. "Exactly. Each person has their place in a ceremony like this." Evran frowned slightly, but Selena was already moving away toward the fitting area. "Come, Talya. I do not want to waste time." Talya approached to adjust the gown, her hands steady only by effort. Inside, she felt a forbidden jealousy burning like guilt. The fitting lasted only a short while because Selena seemed more interested in marking her territory than in correcting the gown. She complained about the hem, asked for the waist to be reviewed, and then said perhaps she would leave everything as it was. Talya obeyed in silence, feeling the bride's gaze weigh on every movement. Evran remained there out of courtesy, although the tension in the room was impossible to ignore. Suddenly, Selena smiled and turned to him. "My Sultan, I would rather continue this later. I want to accompany you now. We are so close to the wedding. We should not waste our moments." Evran seemed to find the sentence strange, but offered his arm without arguing. "As you wish." Selena held his arm and left with a victorious smile. Talya remained standing there, pale, trembling so much that she barely noticed when Zehra Hanım entered and asked, "Girl, what happened here?" Talya took a few seconds to answer, as if her voice had become trapped in the same place where fear tightened. Zehra Hanım closed the door to the sewing wing and approached without haste, but with hard eyes. "I asked what happened here." Talya looked at Sultan Evran's mantle, then at Selena's unfinished gown, unable to lie completely. "She came in while I was adjusting his piece." "And?" Talya swallowed hard. "A pin fell. We both bent down at the same time. That was all." Zehra remained still, but her expression changed enough to make Talya even more nervous. "Was that all for whoever saw it, or was that all for you?" The question struck Talya deeper than an accusation. "Zehra Hanım, I did nothing. I did not ask if you did. I asked if you felt." Talya lowered her eyes, and that silence answered before she could. The old seamstress slowly released a breath, like someone watching a storm form inside a closed room. "Girl, listen carefully. The Sultan is the Sultan. I know. You do not know enough, because for him, a glance can become a memory. For you, it can become ruin." Talya felt her eyes burn, but forced herself to keep her posture. "I will return to work. Nothing will happen." Zehra came closer, speaking quietly so no maid in the corridor would hear. "Did Selena see anything?" Talya hesitated. She did not say. She acted as if she had not seen. "That is worse." Talya lifted her face, frightened. "Worse. A powerful woman who pretends not to see is choosing when she will collect the debt." Talya clenched her hands. "I will stay in my place." Zehra looked at her with severe sadness and replied, Then start by not looking at him as if you have already lost something." Talya tried to obey. She took Sultan Evran's mantle, sat before the table, and threaded the needle with forced steadiness. The dark fabric seemed to hold the warmth of his presence, and she hated herself for noticing it. She should see only stitching, weight, finishing, and deadline. But her eyes remained fixed on the fold he had held minutes earlier. Zara watched from a distance, saying nothing. Experience had already taught her that certain passions do not begin with promises. They begin with too much silence. Talya made the first stitch, then the second, trying to sew her own reason back into place. "I am working," she said, as if she needed to prove it to someone. Zara only replied, "I hope that is all it is." Meanwhile, Selena walked beside Sultan Evran through the main wings, her hand firm on his arm. On the outside, she smiled softly. On the inside, she rearranged every piece of the game. She did not truly believe a seamstress could take her place, but she also did not ignore what she had seen. A sultan might not fall in love with an ambitious noblewoman, but he could be distracted by a simple woman who made him laugh. And Selena did not accept losing even what she did not love. "Evran," she said, making her voice sweeter. He looked at her, surprised by the sudden intimacy. "Yes, I have been thinking about us, about how perhaps I have seemed distant." The Sultan did not answer immediately, because that sentence did not match the woman who had dined with him the night before. Selena noticed the doubt on his face and smiled in the right way, at the right time, with the exact measure of vulnerability. "I was raised to hide my feelings, Your Majesty. Sometimes I seem cold because I'm afraid of seeming weak." Evran stopped near a window, studying her carefully. "Afraid of seeming weak before me? Before everyone?" She lowered her eyes, as if that confession cost her greatly. "When I become your wife, everyone will expect me to be perfect. Perhaps I forgot that you are also a man." The sentence touched the right place, because Evran understood well the weight of being treated as a symbol before being treated as a person. "Selena," she took his hand and finished, "I want to try to be more than an alliance." Evran wanted to distrust her, but her performance was too clean to seem like a lie. Selena knew when to breathe, when to look away, when to squeeze his fingers as if she were afraid. "I do not demand immediate love," the Sultan said honestly, "but I do demand loyalty." "You will have mine," she replied without blinking. In that moment, Evran almost believed her. Almost. Because behind Selena's promise, another memory still disturbed his calm. It was not the bride's kiss, nor the ceremony plans, nor the pressure of the court. It was Talya's gaze so close to his, frightened, sincere, and impossible to ignore. That night, Talya stayed in her chambers, unable to touch the dinner left on the table. The entire palace seemed to breathe wedding, but inside her, everything felt disordered. She remembered Zara's warning, Selena's kiss, and the way Sultan Evran had spoken her name. "Talya," that memory alone was enough to make her shut her eyes tightly. "No," she whispered, "this is not for me." But the heart obeyed no hierarchy. At the same time, in his own chambers, Evran paced from one side to the other, divided between duty and unrest. Selena now seemed willing to make an effort, perhaps even touched by the closeness forming between them. And Talya, precisely because she asked for nothing, was beginning to occupy a space he did not know how to expel. Far from there, Selena met the commander of the guard in the same secluded area of the palace. He was waiting for her impatiently, his face stern and his arms crossed. "I do not like this," he said before she even approached. "What?" "Seeing you kiss the Sultan as if you were his." Selena took a deep breath, irritated by that badly timed jealousy. "I'm going to marry him. I need to seem like his." "I do not want appearances, Selena. I want you." She touched his face, trying to soften his anger. "And you will have me, but not before I have the title." The man held her wrist, not hurting her, but firmly enough to show his dissatisfaction. "I could take you away from here. And we would live as what? Fugitives, depending on hidden coins? We would live together." Selena moved closer, lowering her voice. "I was not born to survive in hiding. I was born to command." He turned his face away, hurt by what she said with such certainty. "So power is above me. It is above everything," she replied. Then she softened her tone. "But that does not mean I do not love you." He was not satisfied, but eventually gave in when she embraced him, and the two remained together in that darkness until dawn erased the argument. At daybreak, each of them returned to their role, as if the night had left no marks. Selena returned to her chambers with the serene face of a future sultana. Evran once again dressed himself in the authority of the sultan before facing ministers, lists, and alliances. Talya entered the sewing wing with tired eyes, determined not to make a single mistake before him. Zara noticed everything, but only handed her a new folded piece. "The next fitting has been moved up." Talya felt her body stiffen. "The gown?" Zara looked toward the door, where a guard was already waiting. "No, the Sultan's. And this time, girl, make sure you keep your hands steady and your heart out of the room." Sultan Evran arrived at the sewing wing with a different kind of calm, as if this fitting had been awaited by him more than by the authorities. Talya was beside the table, folding the mantle Zara Hanum had set aside, and she felt the air change before she even lifted her eyes. When she looked up, she found the Sultan standing at the entrance, handsome, serious, with a new gleam in his eyes. It was not the distant gaze of a ruler looking at a palace employee. It was the gaze of a man who had crossed the night carrying a memory. Zara noticed it immediately, but she had no authority to tell the Sultan to step back, nor could she accuse Talya of anything in front of him, because that would only put the girl at risk. "The mantle is ready for the fitting, Your Majesty," Zara said firmly. Evran replied without taking his eyes off Talya. "Then let us see whether it weighs less today." Talya picked up the piece with cold hands, already knowing that her heart would not stay outside that room. The fitting began with Talya trying to hide behind her own professionalism. She adjusted the shoulders of the mantle, checked the sideline, and pinned 2 temporary stitches near the collar. Evran remained still, but the mirror betrayed what he was trying to disguise. He was looking at her. Talya saw the reflection and, for 1 second, lost the precision of her hand. The pin almost slipped, and Zara narrowed her eyes, worried. Before she could intervene, a maid hurried in. "Zara Hanum, they are calling for you in the main wing. There is a problem with the hall curtains." Zara looked at Talya as if saying everything without moving her lips. Then she left, leaving behind a silence far too dangerous for 2 people who no longer looked at each other as they had before. As soon as they were alone, Talya tried to continue the adjustment as if nothing had changed. "I only need to measure the fall of the sleeve, Your Majesty." Evran held her hand before she could reach for the tape. The touch was not rough, but it made Talya hold her breath. "I cannot stop thinking about your eyes," he said quietly. She tried to pull her hand away, frightened by what those words did inside her. "This is improper. You are going to be married." "I am going to fulfill an agreement," Evran replied. "Do not say that as if it were not a promise before the kingdom. And do not ask me to pretend I found in her what I saw in you." Talya had no answer, because any word could betray her. Evran moved a little closer, still holding her hand. "You do not try to seem greater than you are. You do not use sweetness as currency. You do not speak to me as if my crown were everything. Your Majesty, stop. You are generous, calm, strong, and beautiful in a way you do not even notice." Talya forgot the sewing, the mantle, Selena, and the open door. When Evran leaned his face closer, she did not step back. The kiss happened before reason could catch up with them. A few pieces slipped from the platform and fell to the floor, breaking the spell with a dry sound. Talya stepped away, pale. "That was a mistake." Evran looked at her with an intensity that made her tremble. "Then tell me you do not feel the same." Talya opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her silence was the answer he both feared and desired. Evran kissed her again, more briefly, as if he knew he was crossing a dangerous line. Then he held her hands carefully. "Meet me tonight in the private wing, not to play with you, only so we can speak away from the eyes of the palace." "I should never do that," Talya said, her eyes damp. "I know." That is why I will not force you." He slowly released her hands. "But I will wait." Evran left shortly after, carrying with him a distant expression that Zara saw when she returned to the entrance of the sewing wing. The old woman entered quickly and found Talya trying to gather the fallen pieces from the floor. "Is everything all right?" Zara asked. Talya did not have the courage to face her. Yes, it was only a difficult adjustment. Zara did not believe her, but she also did not corner her in that moment. Talya asked permission to leave and get some air, feeling that she needed to breathe before falling apart. In the corridors, she saw Selena commanding the servants about the wedding decorations. "Do it again!" the bride ordered a frightened young man. Even a child would have more sense of harmony. Talya stopped at a distance, thinking the Sultan was far too good for a woman who confused power with cruelty. That scene made something inside her give way, even as her conscience screamed otherwise. Talya knew she was wrong, knew that getting close to Sultan Evran could destroy her reputation and her life. But she also knew Selena did not seem to love the man she was about to call husband. The day passed with Talya avoiding Zara, avoiding mirrors, and avoiding her own thoughts. Meanwhile, Selena met the guard in their usual secluded place. He was impatient, his voice harsh. "Leave this wedding. Come with me." Selena touched his face. "I need the title. I need you. When I am Sultana, we will have enough power to never obey anyone again." He did not like it, but he accepted when she promised to stay there until late, as if that promise erased the humiliation. When night covered the palace, Talya slipped out of her chambers with a shawl over her shoulders. Each step toward the private wing felt like a confession. When she arrived, she found Evran seated at the table, with no ministers, no guards nearby, only waiting for her. He stood immediately when he saw her trembling. "I do not want you to be like this," he said. "I know you do not deserve to be placed in this position. Then why did you call me?" "Because I could not help it." Talya tightened the shawl around her body, trying to seem steadier than she was. Evran took a deep breath. "I accepted marrying without love because I thought love did not exist for me." Then he slowly approached her. "But I am in love with you, Talya. With your strength, your calm, your beauty that does not need permission." Talya smiled between fear and emotion, and that completely undid Evran. They had dinner together, speaking softly, as if the world outside could break that night if it heard too much. She spoke of her sister, the debts, the sewing, Zara, and the shame of desiring something that did not belong to her. "Selena can destroy me," Talya confessed. "I will not allow it. You say that because you are the Sultan. I live where one word from a noblewoman can become a sentence." Evran held her face carefully. "You are not only a seamstress. I am beginning to think I have gone mad." "Then we have gone mad together," he said before kissing her. And this time, Talya returned it without pretending she did not want to. That same night, Selena pulled away from her lover with a colorless face. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice finally out of control. The guard moved closer, concerned. "What happened?" Selena placed a hand on her womb, irritated with herself. "I found out I am pregnant." For an instant, he stopped breathing. Then he smiled as if he had received a victory. "This is a sign. Now you cannot marry him." "Do not be an idiot," she snapped. "I need to marry him. I need to become Sultana. But this child is mine, and that is the problem. I have not shared the Sultan's bed. This pregnancy should not exist now." Selena left nervously, leaving the guard alone in the shadows, but he did not look defeated. On the contrary, his eyes shone with dangerous hope. "Now you will be mine," he murmured, as if the child were a key and not a life. In the private wing, Talya asked Evran what he intended to do. He remained silent for far too long. "The wedding is almost entirely prepared," he said. "Canceling it now would shake Manisa." Talya felt the answer like a fall. "Then there is still doubt. Not about you," but tears were already filling her eyes. "I do not know what I was thinking when I came here." Talya opened the door to leave and came face to face with Selena in the corridor. The bride stopped, looking at her as if she had found dirt on her own carpet. "What is a seamstress doing in this wing?" Talya turned pale, unable to invent a quick answer. Evran appeared behind her, serious. "She came to adjust one of my pieces urgently." Selena placed a hand on her chest and began to cry at exactly the right moment. "On the eve of our wedding? Is this what I deserved?" "Nothing happened," Evran said, too firmly to sound natural. Selena pretended to believe him, approached him, and kissed him in front of Talya. Talya left in a hurry, hurt not by the kiss, but by the lie he had accepted telling. Selena realized she was losing territory and decided to occupy the most dangerous space. "I will stay here tonight," she said to the Sultan, her eyes still tearful. Evran seemed surprised, but he could not expel his own bride without creating an immediate scandal. Selena entered his chambers thinking she needed to make the palace believe that this night would explain any future news. Evran remained distant, trapped by his own duty, while his mind returned to Talya and the pain in her eyes. At dawn, Selena went straight to the seamstress's wing and ordered everyone out, leaving only Talya. "Stay away from my fiancé," she said, without delicacy. Talya tried to keep her posture. "I do not know what you are talking about." Selena moved closer. "Cruel. You are only a seamstress." She left soon after, leaving Talya with tears in her eyes, until Zehra entered minutes later and said, "You need to get out of this mess before it is too late." The next morning, the palace felt tighter than before because only 3 days remained before the wedding. Every corridor carried flowers, fabrics, lists, and orders, but Talya walked through the sewing wing as if she were stepping on glass. Zehra Hanum watched the girl in silence, knowing that no warning was enough once the heart had already crossed the wrong door. It was in that heavy atmosphere that Sultan Evran appeared, without a large entourage, without ministers, and without the ceremonial advisor. His presence made all the seamstresses stop at the same time. Talya lifted her eyes and stood still wounded by the previous night and by Selena's words. Evran did not look at anyone else. "Zehra Hanum," he said seriously, "I need to speak with Talya alone." Zehra's expression hardened. "Your Majesty, this is a work wing, and still, I am asking, not ordering." Zehra looked at Talya, then at the Sultan, and realized this was no longer just a passing recklessness. There was decision on his face. There was pain on hers. The old woman knew that stopping that conversation in front of everyone would only create more curiosity and more danger. 5 minutes, Zehra said dryly. Evran nodded. "Thank you." The other seamstresses left one by one, carrying fabrics and pretending they were not desperate to gossip in the corridors. Before passing through the door, Zehra cast Talya a hard, almost maternal look. With that look, she was telling her not to forget who she was, where she stood, and how much she could lose. Then the door closed, and the silence between them became heavy. Talya was the first to speak, before Evran could come closer. "There was no need for this." "Talya?" "No, Your Majesty. I understood everything." Evran frowned, hurt by her tone. "Understood what?" She let out a short, bitter laugh that did not match her sweetness. "That I am a convenient seamstress, someone you seek out when the palace becomes too heavy." "That is not true." "Then why did she come to me?" Evran stood still, and Talya continued before her courage ran out. "Selena came in here, ordered everyone out, and humiliated me as if I were dust on her gown." Talya's voice trembled, but she did not lower her eyes. "She said I was only a seamstress. She said you spent the night with her." Evran clenched his hand at his side, angered in a way she had not yet seen. "She had no right to speak to you like that, but she did, and I will fix this." "Fix it how? With another lie?" The question struck him hard. Talya took a deep breath and continued, "You let her kiss you in front of me and upheld a story that threw me into the lowest place possible." Evran took a step forward, but stopped when he saw Talya step back. "I did that to prevent an immediate scandal." "Of course. Not to protect her." Talya smiled with mockery, though her eyes were full of hurt. "How curious, Your Majesty. Every time a powerful man lies, someone beneath him is expected to be grateful for the protection." Evran received the sentence in silence, because she was right. Then he spoke firmly, without trying to soften his own guilt. I regretted it the moment I saw you leave that corridor. Regret does not erase humiliation. It does not, Evran said, but it also does not change what I feel. Talya turned her face away, trying not to listen. Do not say that. I love you. She closed her eyes, as if those words were a greater risk than any insult from Selena. Evran approached slowly, without touching her. I could choose comfort. I could keep pretending this marriage is enough. I could have any woman who accepted my title before looking at me. Talya opened her eyes, overcome by a sad anger. Then why me? Because my heart chose you before I had the courage to admit it. Talya wanted not to believe him, wanted to call him cruel, wanted to say all of this was only the forbidden desire of a powerful man. But there was too much truth in his voice. There was guilt, fear, and a decision that no longer seemed hidden behind duty. And Selena? She asked, still trying to protect herself. Evran took a deep breath. I will end this. Talya stood still. The wedding? There will be no wedding. Your Majesty, this could shake Manisa. Manisa has already been shaken by enough lies. I will not stand at the altar with one woman while I love another. The sentence left Talya without ground beneath her feet. For an instant, she did not see the Sultan, the crown, the risks, or the difference between them. She saw only Evran, a man tired of fulfilling everything except his own truth. And if she destroys me? Talya asked, almost in a whisper. Evran extended his hand. Then she will have to go through me first. Talya looked at that hand as if it were a dangerous bridge. Zara had told her to run from that mess. But all her life, Talya had run from what she could not afford, not from what she felt. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Evran closed his fingers around hers and said, Let us go now. When the two left the sewing wing hand in hand, the entire palace seemed to hold its breath. Maids stopped in the middle of the corridor. Guards exchanged glances. An administrator dropped a fabric list without noticing. Talya tried to release his hand, seized by panic. Everyone is looking. Evran did not slow his pace. Then let them look at the truth before they look at the ceremony. The news began to spread before they even reached the main wings. The Sultan is with the seamstress, someone whispered, and Talya felt that every word could become a blade before the end of that day. Selena was in the smaller hall, examining arrangements and giving orders about the final decorations. When she saw Evran enter holding Talya's hand, she became so still that for a second she did not even seem to breathe. The ladies around her instinctively stepped away. The Sultan released Talya's hand, only to face the bride with respect, but without retreating. Selena, we need to talk. She looked at Talya, then at him, and smiled in a dangerous way. It seems you have already talked plenty without me. Evran kept his voice firm. There will be no wedding. The hall fell silent. Selena placed a hand on her chest, as if she had just received a public stab. There will be no wedding, she repeated, her voice breaking at just the right measure. Evran took a deep breath. I respect your family. I respect the agreement made between our houses, but I cannot continue. You cannot, or you do not want to. I do not want to lie before Manisa. Selena looked at Talya with hatred hidden behind her tears. Because of her? Talya turned pale, but did not lower her head. Evran answered before Selena could turn the room into a trial. Because of me. Because I do not love you. And that truth, spoken before everyone, tore away Selena's last mask of calm. Selena looked around and realized that if she did not turn the game around at that very moment, she would lose everything. Her title, her plan, the protection the lie would give her. So she slowly placed a hand on her womb, letting the tears run as if they were sincere. So you are going to abandon me and your child? Evran stood motionless. Talya felt the blood drain from her face. The ladies released frightened murmurs. Selena stared at the Sultan with an expression of false pain and said louder, I am pregnant. And before that revelation, Evran and Talya stood paralyzed, understanding that the truth would still have to pass through a far crueler trap. Talya did not wait for Selena to repeat that word. Pregnant. It struck her like a sentence, as if all the air in the hall had been ripped away at once. Evran was still standing there, staring at Selena, but Talya could not remain there to watch his choice happen in front of everyone. She took one step back, then another, and ran out before anyone could stop her. "Talya!" the Sultan called, but his voice was lost among the murmurs of the ladies and servants. She crossed the corridor with tears falling uncontrollably, hearing the scandal grow behind her. When she reached the sewing wing, she nearly tripped over her own skirt and leaned against the main table. Zehra Hanım turned in alarm. "Girl, what is it?" Talya covered her mouth with her hand and sobbed. "She is pregnant." In the smaller hall, Selena remained firm before Sultan Evran, as if the pain she showed were legitimate. "Now, are you going to tell Manisa that you abandoned your pregnant bride for a seamstress?" she asked. Her voice choked with emotion. Evran did not answer immediately, because that revelation had struck him at the most dangerous point, his honor before the kingdom. "Selena, we need to speak away from these people." "No," she said, taking a step back. "Everyone can hear." The ladies exchanged looks. The servants pretended to keep their hands busy, and the authorities felt the size of the disaster. "I will not be discarded as if I carried nothing of yours," Selena continued. Evran's gaze hardened. "Be careful with what you claim." She placed her hand on her womb again. "You be careful, Your Majesty. Now this is no longer only about us." And before the door even closed, half the palace was already repeating that the wedding perhaps could no longer be cancelled. In the sewing wing, Talya cried, like someone who finally understood the price of having believed. Zehra held her by the shoulders and made her sit before she collapsed. "Breathe." "I was an idiot," Talya said between sobs. "I believed him when he said he would end everything." Zehra closed her eyes for a moment, suffering for her, but without sweetening the truth. "I warned you this path would only break you. He said he loved me, and perhaps he does, but the love of a sultan does not arrive alone, girl. It comes with court, threats, alliances, and a woman willing to destroy whoever stands in her way." Talya pressed her fingers against her own chest. "I did not want to take anything from anyone," Zehra answered softly. "Even so, now they will say you tried." The rumors began to run through the palace like fire through a dry curtain. One maid swore she had seen Talya leaving the Sultan's private wing. Another said Selena was crying because she had been betrayed on the eve of the wedding. A guard claimed the future Sultana carried the heir, and that no one would dare deny it. Every version increased Talya's guilt and diminished what truth there was. Zehra heard two whispers outside and slammed the door shut. "See? This is how it begins." Talya wiped her face, trying to regain some control. "I need to speak with him." "No, you need to survive until you understand who you can still trust." Before Talya could answer, the door to the sewing wing opened. Selena entered without asking permission, her eyes far too dry for someone who had just cried before the court. Zehra immediately stood. "My lady, this wing is at work. Then work in silence while I say what I came to say." Talya slowly rose, feeling her body go cold. Selena looked her up and down, as if her very presence were a personal offense. "You will leave this palace by nightfall." Zehra took a step forward. "By what authority?" Selena smiled. "By the authority of the woman who in 3 days will be Sultana." Then she faced Talya and added, "Or I will tell all of Manisa that the seamstress tried to crawl into my fiancé's bed while I carried his child." Talya turned so pale that Zehra discreetly held her arm. "That is a lie," Talya said, her voice low. Selena came closer, cruel and controlled. "Truth is what important people can make others believe." Zehra pressed her lips together, furious. "You are threatening a defenseless woman. I am reminding her of the place she occupies." Talya lifted her eyes, wounded, but steady enough not to fall. "If the Sultan learns of this..." Selena laughed without joy. "The Sultan now has a child to protect. Do you really think he would choose you?" Then she turned and left, leaving in the air the order that could destroy Talya before the wedding arrived. Night fell over Manisa, with the palace divided between celebration and scandal. In the royal chambers, Evran paced back and forth, unable to accept what Selena had said. He loved Talya. Of that, he no longer had any doubt. But a pregnancy changed everything before the court. If it were true, there was a child involved, and a sultan could not act like an ordinary man. "Bring Selena to speak with me," he ordered a guard. The man returned shortly after. "Your Majesty, she is not in her chambers." Evran stopped. "What do you mean?" "They said she asked to be alone." The Sultan looked toward the dark window, feeling that something in that story did not fit. Meanwhile, Talya silently gathered a few things, determined to leave before Selena carried out her threat. In the secluded side of the palace, Selena met Commander Aras among the shadows. More nervous than she wanted to admit, he held her hands as soon as he saw her. "Now everyone knows about the child. Come with me. Do not start. I want to claim my family." Selena pulled her hands away, irritated. "Your family will have no name if I lose the title." Aras's face darkened. "You speak as if the Sultan were more important than us." "I speak as someone who understands the world," she replied. "I love you, Selena." She took a deep breath, moved and impatient at the same time. "I love you too, but love without power turns into misery." Aras pulled her close and kissed her, and Selena returned it before fear made her pull away. Talya had already left through a side passage when she heard voices near the old storage rooms. She thought about continuing without looking, but she recognized Selena's voice and stopped behind a column. What she saw made her forget her own pain. The Sultan's future wife was in Aras's arms, kissing him like a woman who owed nothing to anyone. Talya covered her mouth with her hand, paralyzed by the betrayal before her eyes. Selena suddenly pulled away from the kiss and saw her. For 1 second, neither of them breathed. "You!" Selena whispered, seized by panic. Talya turned around and ran back toward the palace. "Talya!" Selena shouted, coming after her with her skirt lifted and desperation finally tearing through her mask. Talya crossed the corridors without caring about guards, maids, or reputation. She reached the Sultan's wing almost breathless and entered before anyone could stop her. Evran turned in alarm when he saw her in that state. "Talya!" She pointed behind her, her voice trembling but full of authority. "Selena is unfaithful." The Sultan stood motionless. "I saw her with another man, a man from the guard. She was in his arms." Selena entered shortly after, breathless, already crying as if she'd been attacked. "Lies. She is desperate, Evran. She wants to destroy the family we are going to build." Talya faced the bride. "Say you were not with him. Say it while looking at me." Selena placed a hand on her womb, using the pregnancy as a shield before the Sultan. "She wants to humiliate me because you did not choose her." Evran looked from one woman to the other, feeling the truth approach from opposite directions. "Enough," he said with the voice of a sultan. "I want names." Talya took a deep breath. "It was Commander Aras." Selena opened her mouth to deny it, but heavy footsteps sounded in the corridor before she could speak. Aras entered without asking permission, pale, furious, and far too determined to turn back. "This needs to end," he said. Selena turned to him in horror. "No!" Aras faced Evran and released the truth that shattered the entire palace. "She is pregnant with my child." Selena was speechless for an instant, and that silence said more than any confession. Evran stared at Aras with a closed expression, but without losing the control that made everyone fear his authority. "Repeat that," the Sultan ordered. Aras took a deep breath, as if choosing between destroying Selena or continuing to be destroyed by her. "The child she carries is mine." Selena rushed toward him, desperate. "Shut your mouth." But Aras did not back down. "No, I stayed silent while you told me you needed the title. I stayed silent while you kissed another man to secure a crown." Talya remained still shaken by the force of the revelation. Evran, however, understood that the lie was greater than he had imagined. Selena tried to compose herself quickly, placing a hand on her womb as she had done before. "Your Majesty, he is lying, because he desires me and cannot bear to see me by your side." Aras laughed bitterly. "You came to me almost every night, Selena." "Lie. You said that after becoming Sultana, I would have position, protection, and access to the palace without needing to hide. Evran took a step forward, and the room seemed to shrink. You used my name to hide another man? Selena turned to him with calculated tears. I was afraid. I did not know what to do. Afraid? Talya asked, unable to stop herself. Selena threw her a hateful look. You do not speak. Evran raised his hand, interrupting the bride before she could continue. She does speak. Selena froze when she heard that. So did Talya. The Sultan looked at Talya for an instant and then turned his eyes back to Selena. This woman took a risk to tell me the truth. Selena shook her head, trying to deny her loss of control. She wants your place beside me, Evran answered coldly, and you wanted my throne without wanting my life. Aras lowered his eyes, overcome by a mixture of guilt and relief. I am not innocent, Your Majesty. That I know. But she lied to everyone. To me as well. Selena clenched her fists. I did what I had to do. Evran stared at her with a hardness that finally made her feel fear. Did you threaten Talya? Selena did not answer. Talya took a deep breath, and Zehra Hanum, who had reached the corridor after hearing the commotion, entered without asking permission. She did threaten her, Zehra said firmly. She ordered the girl to leave the palace or be slandered before all of Manisa. Zehra's presence changed the weight of the room because she was not speaking out of ambition or fear. She spoke as a woman who had served the palace for decades and knew every kind of cruelty hidden behind silk. Evran looked at her. Are you certain of what you are saying? Zehra lifted her chin. I am too old to lie for romance and too experienced to mistake poison for bad manners. Talya brought a hand to her mouth, moved by the fact that she was not alone. Selena tried to laugh. An old seamstress and a love-struck servant. Is that what you are going to believe? Evran replied, without changing his voice. I will believe the facts. Then he called the guards. Take Selena and Aras to the main hall. Everyone will hear this at once. A short while later, the palace hall was filled with ministers, authorities, ladies, servants, and guards. The news had spread so quickly that no one knew for certain whether the wedding would be saved or buried. Evran entered first, with the posture of a sultan, but with the gaze of a betrayed man. Selena came surrounded by guards, trying to maintain the appearance of a victim. Aras walked just behind her, pale but determined not to retreat. Talya stayed close to Zehra, almost hidden, not knowing whether she would survive the public shame she had feared from the beginning. Evran stepped up before the court and raised his voice. The announced wedding between Selena and me is cancelled. A murmur exploded through the hall. Selena brought her hands to her face, pretending to collapse. Your Majesty, think of the scandal, one minister said nervously. Evran turned to him. The scandal would be me marrying a woman who tried to deceive me. Selena cried louder, seeking pity among the nobles. He is humiliating me because he believes a seamstress. Aras took a step forward. No, he believes me. The hall fell silent again. Aras told everything, the secret meetings, the promises of power, the pregnancy, and the plan to make the Sultan claim a child that was not his. With every word, Selena's face lost more color. When he finished, even those who had defended her before looked away. Selena tried her final move, kneeling before Evran. I made a mistake, but I can be loyal from now on. Evran watched her without cruelty, but without any weakness. Loyalty is not born after a lie fails. I will carry this shame forever. You will carry the consequences of your choices. He looked at the guards. Selena will be removed from the palace today and sent to her family's house under watch. Aras will lose his post and answer for his involvement. Selena screamed, trying to stand. You cannot do this to me. Evran answered before everyone. I can, and I should have done it sooner. When Selena was taken away, the hall remained silent, as if no one knew how to breathe after so much truth. Talya tried to leave without drawing attention, but Evran stepped down and went to her. Zehra held the young woman's hand for an instant, as if giving her courage before letting her go. Talya, the Sultan said, low enough to sound intimate but clear enough for everyone to hear. She could not look at him right away. Your Majesty, you do not need to do this now. I do. Evran took a deep breath, and for the first time in that hall, his voice did not seem made to govern. It seemed made to ask forgiveness. I lied to protect you and ended up hurting you. Talya lifted her eyes, and the tears she had tried to hold back finally fell. I did not know if I could believe you. I also took too long to believe myself. The hall followed every word, but neither of them seemed to notice. Evran continued, I accepted a loveless marriage because I thought that was the only life possible for a sultan. Talya struggled to breathe. And now I choose the truth. He held her hand carefully, hiding it from no one. I love you, Talya. Not for what you can give me, but for who you are when no important person is watching. Talya felt confused, frightened, and moved all at once. She thought of Zara, of Selena's threats, of the whispers that would certainly come, and of the absurd distance between a seamstress and a sultan. I am afraid, she confessed. Evran nodded. So am I, but I would rather face all of Manisa for you than live protected by a lie. Zara discreetly wiped her eyes, trying to keep her usual severe posture. Then Evran turned to everyone and spoke with the firmness of a man who had just made the most important decision of his life. Before the court, before the servants, and before Manisa, I ask this woman to marry me. Talya brought her hands to her lips, crying, and when she managed to breathe, she answered, Yes, Evran, even afraid, yes. The hall, which minutes earlier had witnessed the fall of a lie, now witnessed something no one had predicted. Some nobles were shocked, others indignant, but the servants smiled as if seeing justice for the first time in a very long time. Zara approached Talya and gently adjusted a strand of her hair. You are still going to give me trouble, girl, she murmured. Talya laughed through her tears. Evran kissed her hand before everyone, without hurry, without shame, and without retreat. There will be no more hiding, he said. Talya looked at him, still trembling. Then there will be no borrowed dress either. And Zara, looking at the unfinished pieces from the former ceremony, understood that the most important dress in Manisa would still need to be born from the right hands. In the following days, the sewing wing stopped preparing the gown of a cold bride and began stitching Talya's own destiny. The news still burned through the corridors, and many nobles whispered as if a seamstress could never occupy the place Selena had left behind. But Sultan Evran did not retreat before a single sideways glance. Anyone who has something to say about my choice may say it before me, he declared in the council. No one did. Talya heard it from afar, her heart tight, understanding that now her love would also have to face the court, and for the first time, she was not alone. The dress began on the same table where Selena's silk had once rested. Talya stood before the fabric for a few seconds without the courage to touch it. Zara Hanum noticed and gently pushed the scissors closer to her. Are you going to stare at it until it sews itself? Talya smiled with tears in her eyes. I have made dresses for so many women, Zara. I never imagined making my own. Then think carefully, the old woman replied, serious and emotional at the same time. This is not a dress to impress the palace. It is to remind Manisa who you are. Talya ran her fingers over the silk and decided she would not hide her hands in that dress. She refused exaggerations that would erase her story. She wanted fine embroidery on the cuffs, like the designs she had learned as a girl. She wanted small flowers sewn almost secretly along the hem, one for Zara, another for her sister, another for every night when she had almost given up. At the center of the bodice, she asked for a discreet line in a golden shade, not to look like a queen, but to remember that her life had been mended with courage. Is it too simple? She asked one of the seamstresses. Zara answered before anyone else could. It is true. Talya took a deep breath, and in that instant she understood that the most beautiful dress was not the one that hid a woman, but the one that told her journey. Evran visited the wing only once before the ceremony and stopped at the door so he would not see the complete dress. Talya laughed when she noticed his care. "Are you afraid of fabric, Your Majesty? I am afraid of ruining the surprise of the woman who will make me forget every protocol." Zara cleared her throat behind them. "The two of you are still inside a work wing." Evran smiled, but did not pass the entrance. "I only came to say that the hall is ready." Talya lowered her eyes, moved. "And the kingdom?" Evran answered without hesitation. "The kingdom will learn to honor the woman I love." On the day of the wedding, Manisa gathered once again, but this time there was another kind of silence in the palace. It was not the silence of a political alliance, nor of a bride displaying power. It was true expectation. When Talya put on the finished dress, the seamstresses fell silent. The dress embraced her story with delicacy, without hiding that this woman had come from work, struggle, and dignity. Zara fastened the final button, and her hands trembled. "From the very first stitch, I knew that one day you would make the most important dress of your life." Talya held her hand and replied, "I would not have made it this far without you." When the doors of the hall opened, Evran forgot the entire court. He saw Talya walking toward him, and the smile that appeared on his face had no calculation, duty, or agreement. It had relief. It had love. It had the peace of someone finally seeing his own future arrive without a mask. Some nobles still whispered, but all it took was for the Sultan to lift his eyes for silence to return. Talya stopped before him, emotional. Evran held her hands and said softly, "Today, no one will stitch your life for you." The vows were made before everyone, but they seemed to belong only to the two of them. "I choose you," Evran said, his voice firm. "Not because you defied the court, but because you taught me that a man can be loved before he is obeyed." Talya cried, but did not look away. "I choose you, Evran, not for the crown, but for the man who saw me when everyone else only saw my hands." Zara discreetly wiped away her tears, pretending to adjust another seamstress's sleeve. When Evran placed the ring on Talya's finger, the entire hall seemed to understand that this marriage was not born from convenience. It was born from a truth that had almost been destroyed, but had endured. That night, after the ceremony, Evran took Talya to the chambers prepared for the two of them. There was no triumph in his gesture, no haste, no pride of possession. There was care. Talya stopped near the window, still wearing part of the dress, as if she feared waking from a dream too great to be real. "You are trembling," he said, approaching her. "It is because it still seems impossible." Evran touched her hand gently. "Then let us live it slowly until it feels real." And on that first night, the two loved each other with tenderness, respect, and the certainty that no lie slept between them. At dawn, Talya woke with her head resting near Evran, her heart lighter than it had been in many months. He was already awake, looking at her as if he still could not believe his own happiness. "Do you regret it, Sultana?" he asked, teasing her gently. Talya gave a shy smile. "I am still learning how to answer to that name." "Then answer only as Talya." She touched his face. "Talya is happy." Evran kissed her hand. "Then the Sultan is too." And in that quiet room, love stopped being an escape and became home. Months later, the sewing wing continued to function, but now no one entered it without respect. Talya made a point of visiting Zara, listening to the seamstresses, and ensuring that no woman was humiliated by hands too noble to hold a needle. Evran kept his promises in the council, firm against any voice that tried to diminish his wife. "She did not rise out of vanity," he would say. "She arrived here because she has more honor than many who were born above her." With time, Manisa stopped repeating that the Sultan had married a seamstress. It began saying that he had chosen a woman who knew how to turn tears into beauty. And Talya, even dressed as Sultana, never forgot the sound of scissors opening the first path. Years later, in the same hall where Selena had been exposed, a little girl ran while holding a piece of golden ribbon. Behind her, a younger boy tried to keep up with her steps, laughing while Evran pretended he could not catch them. Talya watched the scene with her hand on her womb, smiling at Zara, who pretended to complain about the mess. "These children are going to destroy my boxes of thread," the old woman grumbled. Evran picked the girl up in his arms and looked at Talya with the same love from the day he saw her enter dressed as a bride. "Was it worth facing Manisa?" he asked. Talya smiled, looking at her children, her husband, and the future that had almost been stolen from her. It was worth every stitch. If you enjoyed this story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones.